Welcome to Sex Positive Gaming. I'm Annie, and today I'd like to talk about the training genre. After I did Flavor of the Week training, I got a lot of feedback about the nature of the flavor and the origins. This was going to originally just be about the Akbar games, since they were the first trainer games that a lot of people in the community started with. However, I got so many requests for a history of the early games and questions about why the flavor was so popular that after talking with my patrons on my Patreon page, I expanded the scope of this video. I try to talk about every flavor in a positive light, and my slogan is no shaming, just gaming, but there is a ton of shame associated with almost every flavor and with sexual desire in general. If I really want to help normalize this space, I also need to explain how flavors aren't strange or aberrant, they are actually normal, healthy parts of the human condition. So this topic is going to be broken into 3 releases. This video will touch on the history of the genre and 4 of the main variations we see in books, plays, musicals, and movies over time. Part 2 will cover the history of the game starting in Japan around 1989. The 3rd will cover the present and what the future may hold for the training genre. At its heart, the training genre is about molding or modifying an individual or group's behavior and core identity. These modifications are almost always in opposition to what is perceived as the social or cultural norm. In fact, the act of training is a protest against what is seen as socially acceptable, a protest against how things are. While they are commonly sexual in nature, there are always protests over how humans relate with one another. There are a ton of examples of these types of written works throughout history, such as the Lysistrata, a Greek play from the 5th century BCE where the women of 2 city-states deny sex to all of the men in order to change their behavior and make peace. But the real point we start to see a lot of these works emerge is when society started to hit proto-industrialization. With it comes enough food and political stability that more people can start questioning why society is the way it is and how to make it better. The Taming of the Shrew is one of the best-known Western training works. It was composed by William Shakespeare in the 16th century and has also been remade many times, including the musical Kiss Me Kate and the movie 10 Things I Hate About You. In the original, a newlywed trains their spouse into their idealized partner, and it was a critical commentary by Shakespeare about how they saw the society of their time, namely, the role of marriage and how it should be executed. The biggest explosion of the training genre was during the Restoration period of England, spanning the 50 years after the fall of the Puritans in 1660. Puritans had banned theaters, books, music, drinking, and basically all types of fun. I know it's hard to imagine a situation where the powerful unilaterally decide to prohibit and ban things with no notice in a massively hypocritical way. Fortunately, I have YouTube, Patreon, and Twitter to tell me how to think, and they have a system of escalating punishments to modify my behavior and help me to be a productive source of advertising revenue for them. I mean, a productive member of society. Anyways, there was this explosion of trainer stories and plays called Restoration Comedy. In this time, we see the refinement of many themes in works such as 1662's The School for Wives and 1675's The Country Wife. However, we also see the emergence of another style of trainer classified as reforming the rake in this time period as well, such as 1699's The Constant Couple. A rake is considered someone with a role outside of what the author sees as socially acceptable, like a pirate or monster, and up until the 20th century, the rake character was generally male and their behavior was usually modified by a female. Character roles also became more inclusive, and we even see the emergence of the first professional female playwright, Alfra Ben. As a side note, there were also a spy for King Charles II, which is pretty badass. There is a difference that does seem to emerge in these 2 trainee types. There is a more active, methodical training of the Taming of the Shrew, but the Taming of the Rake takes in a much more passive, emotional, and psychological behavior modification. The results are the same in both paths, but the methods tend to be very different. The Country Wife can be seen as a double trainer, as it has 2 types of training occurring simultaneously. The Country Wife is also seen as part of an emerging style called a comedy of manners, which hit its peak in the 18th and 19th centuries with industrialization. These were works that satirized the status quo and usually involved training in a romantic, social, or sexual context. These were followed closely by the novel of manner style, including many female writers such as George Eliot and Jane Austen. In these, we start to see more active and passive training of females by other females and an almost obsessive critical analysis of society and social norms. This also includes the 1913 play Pygmalion that was eventually made into the 1956 musical My Fair Lady. My Fair Lady and the 1990 film Pretty Women are 21st century examples of the more active training types. Reforming the rake is a much more popular type of trainer in the 20th and 21st centuries. Beauty and the Beast, Twilight, and Bridgerton are all examples of this more passive behavior modification. To be fair, most YA, fantasy, and romance books targeting females have this theme. I mean, seriously, this is a really popular genre. As nations coalesced and industrialized more and more, people had questions about the nature of society and if we should have ever left the trees. In the 20th century, we see the popular emergence of new trainers in science fiction and dystopian works where entire civilizations' behaviors are modified. Yeah, I know that is a fundamental aspect of education and the nature of society, but the idea is that education trains children to be a part of an existing society, not as soldiers to wage war against it. With works like 1984, Brave New World, and Atlas Shrugged, we are shown worlds where civilization is actively trained into a direction that the author finds abhorrent. Other creators jump ahead of the training and just show us the outcome, like in A Handmaid's Tale, Fahrenheit 451, the 1920 Russian novel We, or the Fremen of the Dune series subjugating the known universe. Spoilers. These books act as training primers warning us of the dangers of whatever the author is questioning about their current society. They are much like a modern-day conduct book. Conduct books are trainers that cut out the middleman and directly tell you how you are supposed to behave. Think of them as the terms of service that people actually read. They go as far back as the 24th century BCE work, The Maxims of Dahotep, but peak distribution comes once again with industrialization in the 18th and 19th centuries. I hope that you're getting the idea that this topic is way bigger than most people think. I could spend a lifetime covering all the works that are a part of the social and political commentary that makes up the trainer genre. Trainers are not just something for perverts and sexually dysfunctional misfits. Trainers are an important part of our history as a species. So where does that place us now? Well, we now live in a world where active and passive training is not dictated as much by gender. The 1962 movie If a Man Answers is about a wife very actively training their husband with the help of a dog training manual. The Omegaverse community contains millions of training works that are homosexual or bisexual flavored. Are a lot of these works creepy or uncomfortable? Sure, but isn't that part of what makes flavors flavors? We are attracted to some types and uncomfortable or even disgusted by others. As long as it stays in fiction as a safe and healthy outlet, it is much less likely to seep into the real world. Just as violent video games reduce violence, giving people safe and healthy outlets through fiction for their desires reduces sexual violence. Let us learn from the mistakes of the Puritans and allow people to have healthy outlets for aggression, desire, and their innate sexuality. We all understand that repressing sexuality, gender identity, and sexual preference never works out well. Why are we trying to ban it in our fiction then? Speaking of banning fiction, Part 2 will cover the history of training games and how they fit into the greater meta of the training genre that I touched on today. I wanted to talk about where we come from in order to help better understand who we are and hopefully not be ashamed of what we enjoy. I really want to know what you think of this format for a video. Is 10 minutes not talking about video games okay for a video game channel? And as always, no shaming, just gaming. Thanks to all this month's supporters on Patreon. I wouldn't have been able to do this without you.